So, Nick, I mean, we're here to talk about business resilience and bounce back, and we're standing in an aircraft hangar, and it won't have missed people's observation that the aircraft industry is in the thick of it. We saw EasyJet post an astounding loss figures, the first loss they've ever astounded, but measured in billions, not millions, which is, all of us who run our own businesses, you imagine turning around and saying, oh, by the way, I lost a couple of billion since, it's just a mind-numbing thought. So I guess the first part of that question, you've got two dogs in this fight. You've got one is that you're part of that bigger sector, and the other is that you've got a business that's part. So taking those one at a time, where's it at through your eyes?
Yeah, it's. I mean, obviously, like, as you say, Peter, we're part of the larger aviation industry. The commercial airline industry and what we do are quite separate, but have the same problems and the same issues and the same challenges. It's very sad to see the aviation industry and the commercial side at the moment. Like I say, the losses that EasyJet have posted for the first time ever. They're running about 20% of their routes at the moment, and there's obviously the situation that IAG and British Airways are in as well. So that's obviously has a knock on to everybody because it's connectivity, and this is what I think to some extent the government needs to see a little bit more and try and address. But what we are within private and business aviation, we have seen a little bit of a slight uptick in business this over the summer.
That's good.
And it's all really down to connectivity because the schedules just aren't there. So for us, it's people come to us and say, I want to go from A to B, so we fly A to B, so we can do that for them. There's generally about 1,000 airports across Europe that we can access that scheduled airliners don't. So that's the beauty and the benefit of private aviation. People imagine it to be quite expensive. It's not. It's cost effective. It's a very useful business tool. So we have seen a slight benefit in that way, but then we still had the same challenges as aviation have in general. I mean, we are seeing a downturn in business. But I totally agree with what Joe says. Is that the key word is resilience, and what we've done this year is yes, we've had to look at furlough with employees and so on, and restructure ourselves. But I think I've always said it's a positive in some ways because I mean initially people thought I was bonkers, but it is because you can actually address your business right to the core to rebuild up. Then, so I think as we all come out of this. As long as we all come out together supporting each other, in every industry, then I think we'll all, be better and stronger for it because hopefully this is a one-off global event that will never happen again.
Yeah.
I've always said, the initial first furlough in March, never again, hopefully, you get a situation where you can actually hit pause button on your business.
Yeah.
All trading pretty much stops. And you can actually stand back and look at it. You never really, hopefully, have that situation again. So I've seen it as a positive, and I think we'll as one will certainly come out of it as a stronger business for it, hopefully. And
that's good.
Yeah.
And it goes to show, I think, even within every sector, some really difficult times for some sectors, but every business has its own story, and it's not the same story for everybody. And I think, we, as a wide business community, it's a case of understanding that and trying to get a bit wiser over it.
It is, absolutely, yeah. I mean, yeah, it is. We're still, our turnover is still down, compared to previous years, but it's just the way you modify it, and that's key. Yeah. And I think, the way I've approached as well with our suppliers, and our customers is the same. You've got everybody's going to be understanding of everybody in the chain, so we all pull through together.
Brilliant.
But yeah, it's going to be a long time to recover for the aviation industry because obviously that knocks on to so many suppliers, from aviation to aircraft engines, component manufacturers for those engines, and regional airports as well. Everybody's going to find it a tough time. So it's the key is just to keep open and keep going.
Yeah. Thanks, Nick. Once again, thank you for hosting us.
You're very welcome.
Without further ado, I'm going to hand off to Joe, and let's see what everyone's got to say. Joe.
Thank you.
Hello again, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today for this panel session, and I'm really excited to speak to some of these guys today about how, as I said earlier, how businesses can bounce back and how businesses can be really resilient in these times. We've all had challenges, whether our business has performed well during this time or not so well. We've all had challenges to deal with, and we've had new words to learn, like furlough. I'd never heard of that word before the government came out of it in March. So it's all been challenging for everybody. But the key for us today is to really talk positively about how the future can be for businesses, and how we can support businesses to do that. So yeah, without further ado, I will let everybody introduce themselves. So Philip West, so would you like to chat through who you are? And
hello there, yes, my name's Philip West. I represent a company called Continuity West. We specialise in business continuity, as the name suggests, incident and crisis management and planning for. We mainly work in the public sector and with SMEs, helping them plan for major incidents. We do that by inserting an incident management system into your organisation, and we'll do everything from that to testing you afterwards by putting you through a simulated exercise to see how you manage a major incident.
Thank you. And on the way here, we talked about some major incidents you've been involved in a previous life as well, in the police, I believe.
Yes, I have a previous life. I was an inspector at Avon and Somerset Police Constabulary for many years, and it was down to me to train senior officers in the art of commanding major sporting events, major events, and similar.
Excellent, thank you. And also in the room, we've got Steve Gardner-Collins. Steve?
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Steve Gardner-Collins, and I'm Sales Director for the Hatton Collection. We've got 7 hotels and 2 pubs across the Cotswolds, Somerset and Jersey. And we have the challenge at the moment of being closed and furloughed again. And I'm also Director of Visit Gloucestershire, the destination management organisation for the county.
Thank you, Steve. So we also have, we're really excited today, we've got an international panel. So unfortunately they couldn't fly their private jets into here today apparently, but instead they're on live link. So yeah, so Sandra, would you like to kind of let everybody know who you are and what you're here for?
Yes, and thank you so much, Joe. It's such a pleasure to be here, although I do wish I could be there in person. I'm the CEO of a company called Personal Cities. We've been working with cities for many years, really helping them to discover the power of new partnerships and to understand how to work together to create bigger, bolder transformations in cities and among the entire ecosystem of a city across the planet. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. And a second, Steve Simmons from South Africa.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. Nice to be with you all. Thank you, Joe, for the introductions. Yeah, I'm involved in a business called Synergy GRC as a director. I'm a very hands-on person, and I get very involved in doing assessments in businesses from business impact point of view, business continuity, governance, risk and compliance, and more recently involved with software in the realms of cybersecurity training and also information security. So that's pretty much what I'm doing right now. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Steve. So, yeah, so we'll get into the panel discussion, and I've got a few questions for the guys. But feel free, if you guys, if you feel like you've got something to add to a question, please feel free to jump in. So, Philip, I'll start with yourself, if that's okay. So, businesses growing during a global crisis. What can businesses do to grow? How can businesses grow?
How can businesses grow in a global crisis? Well, I mean, COVID is quite unique in that it's a slow burn crisis. It's been going on for a little while now, and it will go on for some time to come. Let's be clear, there are 3 phases to most crises. There is the initial reaction phase, and to many extents, that's where we still are at the moment. This is followed by the recovery phase. In the UK and in Europe, we tried to go into this phase during the summer, but we've had to go back to really the reactionary phase because COVID has come back. Once it's all done, once it's all finished, we will go into what is called the new normal. Now, this is a term that's been misused by the media. They started to talk about the new normal when we were in the recovery phase. It's not. It's when we get back to where we were, except it will never be the same. There are differences. We've got used to working on Zoom or other video outlets. We have got used to working more predominantly from home. Folk who worked from offices in the business centre of cities are now working more from home. So things are changing, and we have to adapt our businesses to meet those changes. So we need to look ahead. We need to think of where can we pitch, either with this recovery phase or reactionary phase we're in at the moment, or in the future when we're in the new normal. As a couple of examples, Dyson, they're a manufacturing company, were very quick off the mark when we first started with COVID. There was quite clearly in the UK a shortage of ventilators. So they adapted part of their manufacturing process to manufacture ventilators. Now, I'm sure they did that with the right intentions of providing us with more ventilators, but it shows one business was quick to adapt. If you've got a small shop, maybe you need to adapt to home deliveries. There was on the news yesterday a town where all the shops had got together and they formed one website for home deliveries, and somebody else had started a business in this town with electric bikes doing those deliveries. So that whole town had come together and seized the moment. As Churchill said, never waste a good crisis, and it's a time to adapt your business. So look forward to that point in the future when we're in the new normal. Try and think of where people will be, where they'll be working, where they'll be positioned, how they'll have adapted in the way they're doing stuff, and adapt your business to meet those needs. That's the way forward.
Yeah, that's great, and completely agree. And I think one of the things we've seen is that business owners, and this is a negative term positive, when they've been in a difficult situation this year, like you say, crises sometimes are quite short, and they go through the crisis and they come out of it and they don't learn from it and they just go back to the way they were before. But in this time, it's been going on for such a long time now, business owners are kind of adapting themselves. So we're actually seeing better, stronger, more resilient business owners as well.
I think that's right. I think some people, I know that, Steve's a prime example. He's had to furlough a lot of his staff. He's had to mothball his hotels temporarily. He's treading water at the moment. He's not making any money. Hopefully with government support and what have you, he's not losing too much either. He's treading water. And a lot of businesses will be in that situation. But whether you're in that situation or whether you are being able to adapt in the immediate, you really do need to look ahead to this future point. Another example, there are a number of gin manufacturers that are small, and they make unique types of flavoured gins. They tend to sell their product in souvenir shops, and they can't at the moment. One thing they're good at is making alcohol. And one thing we need at the moment is alcohol, not for the reasons you're thinking, but we need alcohol in hand sanitizers. So our gin makers have adapted their alcohol processes to making hand sanitization products. And although we're using those quite a lot at the moment, I suspect in the new normal, we will continue to do so because it will become a way of life.
Yeah, and don't worry, we were all thinking of hand sanitizer, don't worry. And that leads nicely on to Steve here in the room today. How have you seen Gloucestershire businesses perform with your kind of Visit Gloucestershire hat in the hospitality sector, but also then putting that on your business? How are you finding things at the moment?
Yeah, for the hospitality sector in particular, it's not a case of growth, it's a case of survival. And I think those businesses that reopen when we get through this will be the ones that were able to, in effect, completely downscale their businesses. Certainly that's what we've had to do when we've mothballed, for example, but then taking the opportunities that we had through July, August, September to trade and October, and maximising as much as we can our income through those periods of time. We were talking about Christmas earlier and what it's going to look like, and who knows at this stage, but it's certainly something that we have an opportunity again as a sector, if we can open, to maximise. I've no doubt that if we're all huddled together for Christmas Day and Boxing Day and lots of celebration, that we may well be in a lockdown 3 situation. And again, you downsize your business, you mothball it, you survive, and I think the title of Bounce Back Resilience will be testament to those that can survive and reopen again at some stage in 2021. The bigger organisations in our sector have really struggled, the hotels with hundreds of bedrooms, and Gloucestershire has lost several hotels, big hotels in various towns, particularly in the towns, where they won't reopen and they will either be knocked down or turned around to something else. So Gloucestershire has suffered, but also Gloucestershire has a chance with its smaller businesses, smaller boutique hotels and independent restaurants, takeaways, coffee shops. The sector is massive to maximise, survive, and I'm sure we'll be fine 2021 onwards, I hope.
Fingers crossed. And I guess that takes us nicely, from a more local approach to an international approach. So Sandra, if we start with yourself, how do you see the small business market in the United States? You've got a couple of things going on, not just COVID.
Well, that's an understatement, and the election in the United States was a big milestone. But I think this idea of resilience and bounce back is definitely a global phenomenon, and each, it sort of crosses borders, but each country, each city, each town, I think, is finding new ways to deal with what I hope is sort of the perfect time for some transformation. I did want to answer a couple of your questions vis-a-vis some slides. Can I share my screen and show them?
Absolutely.
Now, Joe? Okay. Let's see. Hold on. So, just in answering your questions, the first one was really what's going on in the United States. And today in the United States, there are over 30 million small and medium-sized enterprises comprising over 47% of the workforce. So I think, as I say, across the world, small and medium enterprises are sort of at the core, at the heart of every city. In late March, once the pandemic was acknowledged through a payment protection plan, the United States provided $36 trillion of funding to small businesses. And by April 16th, it was all exhausted. The small business organizations were no longer lending money through that payment protection plan. In early April, which was the pandemic's peak, you can see the statistics on the slide. 25% of SMEs shut down temporarily. Another 40% anticipated they couldn't stay open much longer, and 43% felt that was, a permanent closure was coming. I want to give a couple examples. This is the city of Los Angeles, where it looks really amazing right now in this photo. But the mayor of Los Angeles, Eric Garcetti, has taken several steps to assist the business community. And I think some of this is relevant only to the U.S., but in essence, I think some of this is going to have to continue going forward. As Philip mentioned earlier, we're not done with it. And I think some of this economic relief is going to have to take new and different forms. But in Los Angeles, they created an $11 million economic relief package, and it was a bunch of microloans to help small and medium-sized businesses. They put a moratorium on commercial evictions, which I think is about to lift in the United States across the U.S. They also created a partnership called LA Protects, and this was a very cool idea to use the city's fashion and garment industry to make protective gear. So I think these were very innovative ways, and of course, finding the money was something LA was pretty quick to do. This is the city of Oakland, California, Northern California, if you will, in the San Francisco Bay Area. The mayor there, Libby Schaaf, as I quote her, but she believes that Oakland's small businesses are at the heart of this city. And as I said earlier, it's sort of true for every city. Probably 80 to 90% of the revenue from business comes from small and medium-sized businesses. But Libby Schaaf started this thing called Kiva for Oakland. There's a Kiva for many cities, and I think I'm certain it's a global organization. So for any of the people in the audience that want to explore this opportunity, it's really a crowdfunding loan capability. You can make a loan, you can get a loan for $25 on up, 25 US, but it helps entrepreneurs and businesses who are too young, too small, too innovative to receive traditional loans. So Mayor Schaaf has built new partnerships in addition with over 30 philanthropic organizations. This is another new idea, a new way of figuring out where the money is and how it can help small and medium-sized businesses. I just have one other slide about the opportunities ahead. Joe, you asked to talk about what tactical things could people really do to figure out, what is a new direction for their business? What is, in fact, an opportunity ahead? And I just came up with a few comments that I'd love to take questions on this later if we have time. But there are several tactics to sort of understand what my SME business is all about. The first one is to reshape your network. I think networking is the key. As I say on the slide, to finding new partners, and certainly my appearance on this particular session is a function of networking with Pete Allison and his Business Insights Network. So there is opportunity around the world, and it's a matter of networking to find those new partners, new sources of funding as well. The second idea is to redesign your service, and that means looking at different kinds of programs. There are loyalty programs. There's several companies in the United States now trying this idea that you try it before you buy it. It's sort of a pilot program, creating interest in a service that is just struggling now to hang on, but with new opportunities for the customers or the clients. The third thing is to rethink your brand, and this is something I think probably should be done, COVID notwithstanding, rethinking the brand to lend credibility and allow others to use your name. Extending your brand's reach is what this is all about, especially within a country, within a town, and across borders. The final idea I have that is a very tactical process is to question storm. Question storming is a process that asks difficult questions and then keeps asking questions rather than jumping to solutions or answers before you really explore the problem. And indeed, the problems are pretty severe right now. In the United States, we are returning, as I think is true across Europe, across many countries around the world, to other lockdowns and closures. But the question storming process will help each small and medium-sized enterprise understand what it will take for them to succeed. What are the real opportunities ahead, and where are the new partners? So I think those questions need to be asked by every business around the world. So I'm happy to take more questions and happy to listen to what the additional panelists have to say. Thank you so much, Joe.
Thank you, Sandra. That was fantastic, and yeah, we'll come back to you shortly on some of those points. But Steve, in South Africa, let's go around the world a little bit and let's hear a bit about South Africa and what's going on where you are.
Yeah, well, I guess we might be a little bit different to some of the other countries that are obviously going through similar issues to us. I think in South Africa, SMEs are really the lifeblood of the country. In fact, we're looking at 98% of businesses in South Africa are actually SMEs. So, and I think one of the biggest issues we have relating to that is because of the fact that it's not so much the COVID just sort of just made it a lot worse, but developing of entrepreneurial skills and innovation amongst people who are wanting to be in SMEs and starting in some startups and new companies. I think this is one of the areas where we've struggled a lot. And I think that moving forward, one of the issues we're finding is because they don't have the experience and the knowledge of being an entrepreneur, because I don't know what the listeners and the panel think, but entrepreneurs are actually a special breed in a way. They're people who are strong, they're able to respond and react differently. And in many cases, in our situation, we have to help people to become resilient themselves as individuals. So I think what we're finding is that with the whole business confidence issue as well, and the other big problem is, I know Sandra talked about funding, we spoke about billions of dollars being available. In our case, there's very limited access to low and medium funding, and that's also an issue for us for constraining the business growth. So I guess that we're still in the sort of middle of trying to get beyond to the point where you can say, well, we're getting beyond moving forward beyond the challenges. We're still in the challenges. And I think we've still got slowing demands, so SMEs can't expand like they'd like to. People are struggling to empower their staff because there's a lot of issues with driving the business, and a lot of the owners are too scared to actually get other people involved, so they're very much in the situation of driving the business themselves. And also the issue we have as well is trying to access the right markets in order to sell products is a big challenge. So I guess the whole thing of the laying off of employees, reducing business spend, etc., reducing hours of business, all of these things are still in the play at the moment here. And obviously we're looking beyond that. Obviously some of the other questions coming later that you might ask, I can give you more on what is happening going ahead. But I think that what we really need is a situation where, if you look at the SMEs themselves, how do they mitigate these challenges going forward? A lot of the work I'm doing through some of my associations is trying to figure out how do we assist them in leveraging technologies, how do we assist them in providing better value propositions, being more agile in the face of a lot of uncertainty and in disruption in their operations, because many of the small businesses here have had that situation as well, where they've had a lot of disruption, they've had to lay off people, etc. I think the other area as well, what we're seeing a need is the whole thing of developing a clearer market access strategies, where I think the SMEs need to focus a lot more on their core value propositions that they can leverage, and also to look at supporting sales, and I think also increasing their capacity in the business. And then the other thing, of course, is developing skills. And particularly at leadership level, and creating more capacity for senior leaders to focus on growth and strategy. And the whole thing of sustainability, I was at a webinar yesterday, and the whole thing of the sustainability development goals, which I'm sure you're aware of, came up here. And we are aware of money being available for small businesses. If we talk about just the sustainability goals alone, to get that inculcated into small businesses here is quite a task. What we are seeing though is the banks, the large banks, we've got the big four banks here, they obviously have millions of rand available to put into funding small businesses, but again, what we're finding is in many cases the requirements are not that difficult, and of course many of the businesses, as you probably know, don't last more than the first year. So one of the things we're looking at is trying to work with the banks to help them make that money more useful and invest some of that money into actually entrepreneurship and development into small SMEs, where we can look at programs where we can put specific training programs in with business simulation as part of it, to make sure that when they get going as a startup or techie or whatever they are, the people running the business understand what's required for the business to be resilient, how they need to look at their risks of cybersecurity, the finances, the negotiation skills, and all the things they need to have, the basics for business ready, that they have all those things. And to make sure that we do the business simulation, so the business simulation gives them the ability to be in a real situation of running the business. So I think from that point of view, that's sort of where we are, what I'm involved in at the moment.
Cool, thank you, Steve. So, kind of the next topic I want to just kind of talk through with each of you, and probably slightly different aspects for each of you, but is this word resilience. And I think for me, we've been really lucky in a sense of the business that we run, that we are seeing a lot of resilient business owners at the moment, and we're seeing really resilient business owners kind of coming to the fore. So I guess starting with you, Philip, what do you see as how is a business resilient, and what makes you believe a business to be resilient?
Well, for me, for a business to be resilient, I think you're looking at the whole, but you really need to drill down to the subsets of a business. There are many elements that make up a business, and I think, if you've got an SME that is large enough that you have staff, those staff are probably your most important asset in your business and the one you should be looking after most at the moment to make your business resilient. So your staff, they're possibly furloughed at the moment, or they may be working from home. If they're working from home, have you made sure that they have got a good network connection? What's their IT like? Is there anything you can do to help that? If their broadband is poor, could you invest in a 4G router to help maximize that? Have they got the right furniture? Are they sat on the dining room chair, for goodness sake, or could you provide them with a decent office chair? I know of one company at the moment who, for all their staff, are either furloughed or what have you, they're doing more than just ringing up occasionally to make sure they're all right. Once a month, they send a gift round during this time. The most recent one was a rather unique, quirky mug, and it was full of hot chocolate sachets and marshmallows. Not big and spectacular, but it meant a lot to those staff that were there. I know of another chap whose business has gone completely at the moment, so he's diversified, and he brought in a load of raw chocolate, and he has been making his own novelty chocolates at home. And guess what? The people that were supplying treats to their workers got hold of the guy who's making the novelty chocolates, and now he's supplying them, who are sending it out to their workers. These are examples of taking this moment. So look after your staff. But of all the human beings in your company, the most important one is you. If you go under, then who's going to do it? So look after yourself. Look after your own mental health at this time. Make sure you get out, get exercise, and make sure that you keep yourself on top of the ball game. Other assets in your company, the other subsets, your premises. Has that been mothballed at the moment, such as Steve's? Or are they partly mothballed? Do you need to consider your security? Have you got the heating turned down so you're not wasting energy, but enough to prevent frost damage or damp? Your water supply, are you running that occasionally? Or when you go back in, you're going to have to flush the whole thing out to prevent Legionnaire's disease. Other assets, have you got vehicles? Are they standing still? You occasionally need to run them. Not just run the engine, run the car around the block. Make sure those tyres are stood in a different place on the ground and the oil's been washed around the engine block to keep and maintain it. And finally, I suppose, the main thing is your business reputation. And that's another aspect of your resilience. How are you presenting yourself during this time to your customers, your stakeholders, suppliers, anyone? Make sure they are aware you're still around, you're still operative, you're still doing stuff. And I think if you can bring all that mixed together, that's how, in my idea, you keep your business resilient.
That's excellent. Thank you. And all of those points really, resonate with me. What we're seeing, what we did in March when we sent everybody home, and like you say, everyone was on dining room tables, and then you slowly start to invest back into them, and you start to realise, when we did some gift boxes as well, and all that sort of stuff to make sure the staff were feeling a bit loved as well. But interestingly, taking it to the extreme, there's a business opposite us, a hospitality business that shut in March, pretty much, and they've had the lights on ever since. So they probably do need to consider turning them off at some point. But
it's simple, isn't it? But we forget it. You have to stop and think. Try and just go back over some of the simple stuff. If you haven't got a business continuity plan, it won't be written in there to do it. So you now need to go to do it retrospectively.
And we'll come on to that in a short while. So, Steve, the same question for you, but more about the area of Gloucestershire. How do you feel that Gloucestershire's been resilient during this time, and how is it faring, if you like?
Gloucestershire has been resilient. Gloucestershire's been resilient from lots of different ways. The start of it being that we managed to keep the spread of coronavirus quite low at the beginning of this, not so quite low now. But I think from a business perspective, the resilience will come from survival, and that will be who reopens, in the future. But something that plays on my mind at the moment is resilience. What happens if this carries on? for another year. What happens if this happens again? And we're very focused on now our own mental health, our staff's mental health, mothballing our business, furloughing our staff, how are they? All these sorts of questions. We're in the moment. But actually, how do we become resilient for what's next? And when coronavirus came about at the beginning of the year, there was always a forecast that it was going to happen. And all of a sudden there was this mass rush to present to us furlough, a new word that we've all learnt, lockdown, our children being off school. We're in crisis mode. And actually, if this happens again, what is our plan? What is your plan as a business owner? But what is our plan as well? And Gloucestershire, along with all the different counties in the country, fell in the same situation as the country. But what's really important is that businesses plan and the county plans. We are resilient. We're still around. We're either mothballed or we're still trading. But actually, if this does continue or it does happen again, what is the plan? That's the only way we're going to know if we're resilient or not. Can we survive the future?
And without being controversial, the county plans, the businesses plan, and maybe the government plan as well, because clearly, as you said, it was coming and there was no major plan around that, but I'll get told off for that, I'm sure. So guys in, I don't mind who we go to next, South Africa or the US, but how is resilience being done over there? Maybe Sandra will come to you again, because I'm really interested in the US because you've got COVID and you've got a president at the moment who has had a particular way of dealing with it, and you've got an incoming president who's got a completely different way of dealing with it, and that must be really challenging. And obviously also your states are all kind of got their own devolved governments in a sense as well, haven't they, that they can kind of operate as well. So how has America fared during this time? How are businesses being resilient in such a really kind of difficult time for you guys?
Yes, thank you, Joe. It's true that we do have some unique situations in the U.S. right now, and you've nailed them. I mean, beyond COVID, racial, social injustice, divisive politics, income inequality, you name it. A lot of these crises are converging on all of us, and I think that's, again, the opportunity for us to look positively at what we can do to be resilient. What Steve said earlier about what happens if this carries on, I don't think it's an if. I think it's a yes. Even with vaccines, even with an amelioration of the disease across the planet, I think we're going to be with it for the foreseeable future, frankly. And if it's not COVID-19, I have friends that are looking at COVID-35. So I don't know that we need to say we live in a COVID world. I think it's that we live in a world that has to plan for additional viral attacks, for other kinds of crises in the world, and that's what will make us, in fact, more resilient. I would like to give a couple of really positive examples of what I think is resilience in the U.S., and I believe it's happening in other cities around the globe. One is that almost every major city in the U.S., and even the smaller towns, have opened up their streets. So for a restaurant to survive, especially through the more moderate, the more temperate months, they've opened up their street and expanded tables onto the streets with barriers around them. People they're decorating these barriers so that you feel like you're in a restaurant setting, and of course they're all physically distanced and everyone's wearing masks. But I think it is helping these restaurants to survive. Now that is not helping them to thrive. And as temperatures get colder, every restaurant in Washington, D.C., where I live, is investing in heaters. There must be a huge spike in the stock market for heating equipment. But I think it's a good example of what's happening, how people are getting creative to take care of these small restaurants that are really struggling to survive. One other idea I want to talk about is this idea which I mentioned earlier about partnerships. Who else can I partner with? Maybe I partner with my competition. Maybe we join forces. Maybe there are ways to look at chambers of commerce, boards of trade, civic organizations that really want to help the businesses survive. If the businesses don't survive in many cities in the United States, the cities won't survive. What makes the city attractive? It's the places to go, the entertainment, the recreation, the art, the culture, the music. So all of these things need to continue, and I think we're all getting more creative, which is the good news about resilience in the U.S. and elsewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And like as you say, here in the UK we did similar things. We allowed, we opened up the kind of takeaway market for pubs and restaurants and things like that. Removed those licensing laws in order to do that, which was fine in the summer when the weather was beautiful. But I'm not sure many of us want to sit outside at the moment and do too much. But yeah, like you say, doing things differently to really try and push on and grow is the wrong word, but really kind of survive and stay afloat, if you like, but in a positive way. Thank you. So Steve, in South Africa, what do you believe? Talking from a South African perspective, how do you see the resilience of the South African market? But also, do you believe resilient individuals are kind of acting differently? Can you kind of tell when somebody is resilient now that we're in this world?
Yeah, well, I'll sort of maybe tackle the second one first. I don't know if any of you watched the SpaceX docking yesterday. It was quite interesting because the actual rocket that went up to assist with SpaceX was actually called Resilience. So it just reminded me of that word and what it means. I think that what I'm seeing generally when you're looking at resilient individuals, I think everybody wants to play their part. I think, and also I think being intentional around the space we operate in. And I think it extends beyond work. I think it extends to the family as well. And because of our unique situation we have in South Africa, one of the things I've always done over the years, I've worked in consulting here for over 23 years, 24 years. I've always been looking for people in the companies I've dealt with who have got that something different about them. And what I do then, I work with these people and help them along. And I've had some real wonderful cases of individuals who I've worked with over the years, and they've been very successful moving forward in their work, and some of them in their own businesses. So I guess it's a question of, when you're looking at resilient people, as a consultant at least, my job is to get alongside people and help them in that journey. And I think to help them understand that to be resilient, they need to think differently. And the skills to being able to persevere and manage stress and deal with triumph at the same time and facing challenges. And these are difficult things, and a lot of people struggle with it, and at times you feel like giving up. But what I've always done is encourage people to be resilient themselves and to continue with the things that are the right things to do going forward in whatever work they do. I think that also emotions, I've seen a lot of emotional outbursts here. I think a lot of people are struggling with their thoughts and the conditions of the changes that have been happening. You must bear in mind we're a very labour-intensive market here. So, for example, when the restaurants close, all the guys that do deliveries, and we have loads of guys doing deliveries to households here, they were out of work completely during the first phases of the lockdown. So a lot of the people who are, as I told you, the backbone of our company, South Africa itself, were not able to work at all. So the ones that are through that whole process of what we've been through, thinking differently, can only be those ones who are resilient. They're the ones who've actually realised that they need to focus on the positive aspects and opportunities. And I think it's very difficult to do that when you're faced with challenges. But also, I think persevering, overcoming obstacles, being able to recover quickly from setbacks, and having energy and drive. And I think at this time I've seen a lot of people having a lot of energy and drive. I've seen a lot of creative things as well, like Simon was talking about creativity. I've seen a lot of that here in our country in these months. A lot of good stories, people pursuing things, and also being able to grow relationships. And that was another thing I heard that came up, building networks and building relationships. Key, absolutely key for these people. And a lot of them need the help to do that. But they can't just do it themselves, they need people to help them to draw alongside them. So I guess that what I'm seeing here, and if you look at the history of our country, I think there is a lot of resilient people, because through the circumstances we've gone through over the years here, people have been sculpted. And how they handle that and how they move on at this time, it's never a bad time to be more resilient, to become a resilient individual. And I think in a sense our history has actually sort of sculpted that for us. So fortunately, in all of this, we've still got people who smile, who are happy, who will look beyond the situation and move into the new challenges of next year, which is very encouraging for me. And one of the great things about this country is being able to overcome challenges. And I'm sure you've seen that when you look at the Rugby World Cup. It came at the right time for South Africa to win that, I must be honest with you. It made a huge difference here. And it was actually not long before the whole COVID outbreak happened, so everybody was on a high. And that high still continues with regard to that. Looking at the market in general, I think one of the things for us here at the moment is obviously being able to move products and services into new markets, to look at the new markets. Obviously the PPE aspect is a big thing. There are a lot of companies moved into that. I know that some of the distillers corporations, I think it was Philip mentioning earlier about making the different sanitizers. One of our largest companies here, the distillers, had to shut down completely, and they did the same thing. They started making other things, using the same equipment to produce other products, which they might still continue, obviously, on a smaller scale going forward as part of their production. So I think, generally speaking, we've still got a long way to go to get back to where we need to. Yeah, the outlook is positive, but it's a long walk, Joe, to be honest with you. Yeah, long journey.
Great, thank you. Yeah, no, I think we've had conversations similar to what you've just talked about, in terms of most people we're talking to are being much more positive and much more kind of, they're thinking of ways they can improve, rather than earlier on in the pandemic it was much more around, this is the biggest crisis that's ever been around, and
Optimism.
how am I possibly going to survive? Whereas people are coming to the realization that this is going to be around for a little bit longer, and let's spin that into a positive. And on that kind of positive note, I'm going to switch the order around a little bit and come to you, Steve, first this time. In terms of Gloucestershire, pivoting and adapting is one thing that we've heard a lot as well during this time. Have you seen, in your role as Visit Gloucestershire, or maybe as your role in the hotel group you have, pivoting and adapting? How much of that have you seen, and have you got any good examples of it?
Yeah, I mean the fact of some of the restrictions that we've had to operate under has meant that businesses have had to adapt. Certainly businesses that didn't used to do takeaway now do takeaway. Businesses that used to do 80 covers have had to survive on 40. We've had to adapt procedures across the sector, from attractions on ticketing, digitisation. Used to be able to just rock up to a wildlife park and buy a ticket on the gate. Everything went online when we were reopening. It's the same with cashless payments. Lots of businesses having to convert over to card only. And the hotel world has become quite hands-off for a hospitality sector to have to socially distance from the very customer that you want to be very hospitable to. We've had to go down the road of making check-in very quick, very socially distanced. Hi, welcome to my hotel, but I can't come near you. Breakfast service has been all at once, as opposed to a buffet where there's nothing nicer than getting up and saying morning to everybody and having that morning social, but you just don't get any of that at the moment. So what has been great about having to adapt is that we have adapted. And I think that some of the practices that Phil mentioned earlier about having to change, having to adapt, they are actually more conducive with, I think, how we would like the future to be anyway. I think we're all a little bit too close together, bunched up on top of each other. And actually by adapting through a period of time and getting used to not being so hands-on actually has made more people feel comfortable, and you're not sitting a foot apart in a restaurant. I remember going to Café Rouge one day, and I was having a conversation, and I might as well have been talking to all 8 people in a row, because you're so close together that actually it's not healthy to eat your meal that close to the next person. Heaven forbid they sneeze or cough, and it's all over you and everyone else. So I think that we've adapted positively, and actually we should take that forward and come back without having to cram hundreds of people into different places.
And you know, it's really interesting you say that, because I saw a picture the other day. I was watching an Australian rugby league game, and there was a lot of people in the stands. Not obviously as many as there should be in normal circumstances, but there was a lot of people in the stands. And I looked at it and I felt a bit disappointed. I was like, I miss that, you know, all of us being together, camaraderie type thing. And I even looked at a picture of the Tube in London, and I thought, I miss cramming on the Tube. Now, naturally, I don't. Like, I'm glad I'm not on the Tube being crammed. But it's that thing that we grew to have in our lives, we just took for granted. And as you say, you know, and I should say this with a bit of caution, but, you know, I haven't been ill this whole time of COVID, because everything we've been doing has been socially distant. We've been washing our hands. We've been, you know, doing all these bits and pieces. And actually, you know, I had colds left, right, and centre all the time. So it's really interesting, isn't it, how we've adapted our techniques, and it's these things of washing our hands. We're being forced to wash our hands. We should have been washing our hands in the first place, you know. Yeah. And that, like you say, there's some real positive things to take away from this.
Yeah, and actually something that the sector has really learned, and I'm as critical as you can tell as the rest. How many times did you go to a restaurant and look at the floor and think, good God, when was the last time it was cleaned? When did you go into a toilet in a coffee shop or in a restaurant and think, Jesus, it stinks, it's unclean? We've actually had to really step up and change what we've done in terms of service delivery, and a lot of it just comes down to hygiene in general practice. But we've slipped through years of opportunity and taken it for granted what we had. We've maximised opportunity for growth and credit and lending. Bang, grow, but actually thin it all down again. Let's get back to the basics. Washing our hands and cleaning the floors should have been being done anyway, but I hope for the future that you go into a restaurant and you don't see dirty floors and you get lovely smelling toilets.
Indeed, I will be making sure I check. I'm going to come to one of your places, and
I know.
I will be certain.
So I did say I'll probably set myself up.
I'll be certain to let you know.
I'm critical as much as the rest.
Thank you. Phil, businesses being able to bounce back, you know, we talked about pivoting and adapting, you know, bounce back ability is something as well, because whilst they might be able to pivot, they also might not be able to. And then they need to be able to bounce back from that. So how do you see a business being able to kind of survive and then bounce back?
It's a good question. I'm gonna answer that by just going back on something that's been said before. And you know, you are all talking as if furlough was new. In actual, not that I can remember it, but back in 1665 we had the plague of London. And believe it or not, furlough was around then.
Just before my time.
Just before your time, yeah. Charles II, actually, from his own purse, furloughed all the tradesmen in London, so that those that survived the distemper were there when they got back to their new normal. The plague, they survived the plague. London grew afterwards. We've got a COVID crisis at the moment. We actually. You say, I hope there's not another one. There will be another one. Absolutely. These things will come. They come in our past. They will come again. We knew this one was coming. We've had 2 near misses in the last 20 years. I knew it was coming. And of the 25 plans I've put into businesses, one of them is on a pandemic. So now we're here. How do we bounce back was the question. What you have to do is you have to be proactive. You don't want to be inactive. You don't want to sit there and wait for it all to happen around you. You need to take what I said before and look at where we will be and position your business to meet where we will be. Start making plans now. The government, and this goes back to what we've heard from our 2 guests from both South Africa and America, and certainly it's true of here in the UK. There are funds available at the moment. The government is bending over backwards to help small businesses. There are grants, there are loan schemes. If in your business you had plans before COVID to do something in the future, some sort of expansion. Now may be the time to be planning that, because the loans are there and the moment is, everything's changing. So change with it. Seize the moment, seize the opportunity. This is not the time to sit back and do nothing. This is the time to move forward, and the businesses that will bounce back will be the ones that seize the day and do that proactive planning. Take your business plan now, which was good before COVID, is no good anymore, and change it, alter it. Think in terms of business continuity. Business continuity is a great thing. It can reduce your insurance. It's something, if you've got in place as an SME, believe it or not, in this country, in the UK, the government and local government and national government are obliged to give 25% of tenders to SMEs. Go and bid for them. Why not? But if you do, they will require a few things to be in place. One of them will be a business continuity plan. It's not expensive, it's quite simple to put in. You know, and it pays dividends because it helps you plan and think about the future. It helps you and your business become resilient. It helps you beat all the problems that might come down the line. So those are the sort of things you should be doing, thinking ahead, seizing that moment, and just plough forward and be one of the businesses that not only survives but grasps this moment and grows. And I know we said we can't grow at the moment. We can if we plan sensibly.
Yeah. I think that's the key. Some areas naturally can't, given the industry they're in. For example, Steve's industry over there, it's very difficult to grow.
It is difficult to grow, but we are planning. We've taken advantage of the grants. We have purchased an awful lot of equipment that will allow us to reopen in spring a lot sooner. Sandra was mentioning about the cold weather. We're preparing, although we're kind of mothballing ourselves, we are preparing that as soon as we can get to March and the sun comes out, we've got all the equipment ready to do outdoor dining. It'll have lots of heating, and it will provide environments that won't keep everybody inside. We've got to go through a period of the winter where nobody wants to go outside really and eat, especially. I don't mind running around with a coffee, but I'm not sitting there drinking it, it'll be cold. But we have an opportunity to plan and bounce back a lot earlier if we can get to about March, survive till March, and then I think with the sun coming out, take advantage of the grants, purchase all the equipment that you really wanted to have, and reopen as soon as you can in the new year.
Yeah, and I think, without talking for people with issues or whatnot, but if a business is struggling and you're doing okay, or you've got some capital, or you've got a grant, there's also an opportunity for you as a business to say, well, actually, could I look at that business as an acquisition, or something like that as well. There's opportunities around for people that aren't able to thrive, maybe, or it might be the trigger that somebody wants to step aside that gives you the opportunity to step in. So, as you guys say, lots to say.
I think you need to consider your supply chain. How local is it? How effective can you truly support your local businesses and purchase locally, buy local, try and think hyper local right now wherever you are in the world, so that as an area you can really survive and come back.
And that's going to lead me on to a question, Sandra, and I guess Steve as well in a second, but I guess the challenge with that is, how do you buy local when actually naturally it's the local shops that tend to have had to shut, and it's the national chains that have been able to open? That's another challenge in itself, isn't it? Being able to... Yeah.
There is this argument of the big nationals being able to stay open and the independents closing, but they are people, and there are things like LinkedIn. If you are struggling to find something, or you want to source something locally, try and root out that person that's probably furloughed at home, and I'm sure regardless of furlough they will probably be up for working together. Collaboration, partnership is something again been mentioned today.
Excellent, and that does lead us nicely. We're talking local here, given that we are local, but Sandra, one of the questions I had for you was, and again fitting in the setting that we are, but international travel has obviously ground to a pretty much halt over the course of. Are you seeing American businesses? Because I'm all for international business and etc. There's obviously the local element, but also the international element. Are you seeing US businesses? And I'll ask you, Steve, a similar question in a second about South Africa, but kind of closing their net of where they're looking, or not?
Yeah, it's such a good question, and I think quite difficult to measure, frankly. But I do believe that the international travel will resume. It is picking up here in the United States. You know, at what level it's hard to gauge, I suppose. But I do believe that the opportunity to work across borders is stronger now than ever before. I think Steve mentioned about, you know, this idea of using LinkedIn to reach out to other people. I wouldn't underestimate the power of that. I think any social media where we can connect and collaborate. I've met several people through international meetings, and now we're talking about what are the synergies? How can we work together? How can I give you credibility in the U.S.? How can you find new opportunities for us to work together, for example, in a joint consulting operation that serves cities? So I think we're seeing a lot of that happening. I would recommend, I've recently talked about technology and its importance to cities, and it's also, there are burgeoning technologies for small and medium-sized enterprises, specifically artificial intelligence, IoT, and the cameras and sensors that are everywhere in every city around the globe. Autonomous vehicles, autonomous drones. I mean, there are businesses that center around these technologies that cities are very interested in. Technology folks are really looking, you know, what is the new innovation we can use in our city to make our services more effective, to bring more technologists, more entrepreneurs into the fold. So I think, you know, it's sort of like where are the new opportunities? And whether you find them on social media or in meetings like this, I think, you know, there's the answer. And one other thing I wanted to mention in terms of giving ideas to the audience, which is definitely, from my perspective, a global audience, and what you're doing in Gloucestershire is really remarkable, Steve, and to all of you that are figuring out, you know, what is it that we can do locally. I would recommend 3 books, and I this is sort of off the track, but one is Humankind by Rutger Bregman. It's about thinking differently about how we approach problems and how we solve problems in an optimistic, positive way. There's a book called Digital Darwinism by Tom Goodwin, what Steve Simmons was saying was about, you know, how do we think differently? How do we let go of our muscle memory to do things differently? And the third book is written by a Brit named Kate Raworth. It's called Donut Economics. Everybody should read it. I think if you're in business or if you're working in a city, you really need to understand some new approaches to the way we are processing information, the way we are extending our brand to others. And I hope those recommendations get taken by everybody listening. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you. And I don't know how this live Zoom stream is working, but whether Sandra can put those in the chat section for people to see, just to make sure people got those maybe. But I would like to see them too. So great, thank you. And Steve, in South Africa then, you know, how are you seeing the local and the international kind of, you know, this is a perfect example of international you know, collaboration. You know, we're all here, we're all collaborating, as we said, internationally. How are you finding that from a South African perspective?
Well, I think that, you know, tourism and hospitality, talk about that a bit, it's probably been the hardest hit of all in South Africa. It's such a point where one of my colleagues runs a business where she brings people in to local game lodges and also Botswana. I mean, they had to obviously put funding into the business because it stopped completely. So at the moment, our lockdown rules are, you know, you can come into a country as a business person as long as you've got a COVID certificate, you know, it's proved you've been tested within the last 72 hours. So you can't come in here at the moment to from outside our borders internationally to be a tourist, but you can come on business. So this has obviously caused major disruptions internally. But for example, what Kruger Park have been doing in all the game lodges all over South Africa, they've sort of combined together. And if you go onto YouTube, I don't know if any of you have, if you go on YouTube, you'll find they have game drives now live on YouTube. So you can actually be part of the game drive as they go around looking at the animals, etc. And that's running all the time. And obviously they're doing that just to keep it going, to keep the people working, and obviously to keep the marketing going, so people can still see that we've got this beautiful country where you can still look at these things online. So that's one of the things that they've been doing. As far as hotels and that are concerned, it's the same principle here as well internally. You can now travel, so locally a lot of people are now traveling more internally, and lots of specials, lots of discounts on staying at different places locally. In South Africa, our big holiday period is December. We know coming up to December, everything closes down for about 6 weeks. It's not like Europe where it's August. Here we do it in December. So we're hoping that this will be a bit more of a situation where locals will be able to go away. They can travel outside of the regions now, so you can travel to the coast and things like that. So there's a lot of specials on at the moment regarding that. Also the restaurants. Also now you can go to restaurants and you're allowed to eat and drink, but there are still time limitations. And I think what I'm noticing though is a lot of people are actually preferring to stay at home. I think a lot of people are ordering food in. It's a big thing here, I'm sure it is over there as well. Ordering food in and staying at home, and I think obviously a lot of the restaurants are moving more into catering allowing for deliveries, as opposed to allowing for people to come and sit down for meals from that point of view. So I would say in that industry here, those are the sort of general innovations people are doing, and it's going on all the time. I think a lot of production. I think there was a lot of production of the masks for the for COVID, and we've got some really wonderful looking masks here in our country, produced locally by people and sold. Obviously it's wound down a bit now, but that was another area I noticed for people being innovative. So we are an innovative nation, we are a creative nation, and I guess we have to get over these things. But the tourism industry is a real tough one here at the moment, yeah.
Thank you, Stephen. That is great. So I think we've got literally kind of 1 minute left, really. I think we're already over time, which sums me up. So, look, thank you all, first of all, for being here. Thank you all for offering your insights. It's been really interesting for me to hear these insights, and I'm sure the audience have really found it valuable. I guess, like I say, we've got literally 1 minute, so just a quick 10-second from each of you. What could one tip that you could give a small business owner to help them? Let's end this positively.
Yeah.
Phil?
Just plan. Look ahead and plan and think about it, and then once you've planned, activate that plan and go forward.
Thank you, Steve.
Keep your activity levels up. We've talked about social media today. Don't let your business, although it can be closed and mothballed, don't let it drop off. I've kept the businesses live on social, engagement with our customers. Let everybody know that you will be back, and stay optimistic and positive.
Thank you. One last tip from you guys. Steve in South Africa, one quick tip.
Yeah, plan is planning to fail. I go fully with Phil there. And yeah, just keeping your head above the water, focusing, just not surviving, but trying to thrive, as hard as it might be.
Thank you. And lastly, Sandra.
Yeah, thriving is the key, and I think the way to do that is to continue to reach out however you can to new businesses, new partners, new opportunities. Networking has never been more important, and doing it on Zoom is actually quite fun. So I think embrace the reality and continue to network.
Thank you very much. And if you want to connect with any of us, we're all online on LinkedIn, etc. So if you've heard anything today you want to talk more about, please let us know. And thank you for joining us.